signs in Leos.
And I think you've set yourself up in a way to be proactive in terms of dealing with these kind of situations. It's something we've talked about before on the podcast. It's like, don't overproduce, make sure you have avenues for these animals to move. Make sure you have those connections to be able to move these animals, whether it's shows or something else. And it's a lot of people hear and it's like, okay, that'll never happen to me. Like, that's never going to be a situation, but you're in the situation. People are like, oh crap, like we're in this, and you've never put yourself in a situation where you've had to make that compromise. And now a lot of people are in the situation where it's like, I literally don't have space. So it's like, what other option do I have? And I think it's a big reality check on people that not only is the hobby not always going to be at the top of its game, but also like these things that people are talking about, it's like, it's real stuff. It's not something we talk about. It's not a theory. It's like stuff that's actually happening, and people are really coming to terms with that right now.
Thankfully, it doesn't happen to this degree for a lot of people that much. I mean, obviously, how many are you going to produce, and what's your, what are your avenues to move them? Like, that's always a thing. But like, I think it's really significant right now, which I think that's, again, this is one of these things that it's gonna make or break.
Yeah,
a lot of people. And I know, people remind me often of how fortunate I am to have the local people here, the Dons, like they're even geckos that, pop out that are special needs. Like, I have avenues for customers that love those animals as pets. So I literally, knock on wood, like I'm never in a situation here where, where numbers is an issue, right? I'm backed up here to where, the next year's production is going to suffer. I'm going to have to scramble to, get more racks up or anything like that. So, but I think it's relevant at any scale. Like, it doesn't matter. Like we talked about earlier, like, everybody has the space that they have. It doesn't matter if you have, uh, you know, one rack that'll hold 30 babies, but, or if you're, if you're at scale where you're producing 600 plus a year, it's all relative. You still got to be mindful of these kind of things. Otherwise, if you do these kind of things reactively, and it's been quite a few years since that's been the case, but I've definitely been, didn't plan accordingly, didn't think, wasn't proactive about these kind of things, and it's no big deal. And then, you've got more than you can handle on the ground and scrambling as far as space and, what am I going to do? And that's just it's a whole level of stress that's pretty well completely avoidable. Um, you just, you can't just shrug it off and be like, oh, I'll figure that out, when the time comes. So,
right.
so yeah.
Yeah, it's a big situation for people who are kind of in this, not necessarily in that kind of situation, but are breeding, or like it's kind of like just feeling the waters of like what it looks like to be a leopard gecko breeder at this point in time and looking into the future. What are some smart moves or like just advice that you could give people during a time like this, and how to just curate themselves and kind of set themselves up for success and not continue to I don't know, just fall into this cyclical nature of where the hobby is moving, and someone's like really serious about this and wants to not only hear the information, take in the information and put it into practical steps for them to be successful. What advice do you have for those kind of people?
So I think, and these are largely things that we've talked about before here. So number one, like we talked about, differentiating yourself visually, with your animals. And that goes back to, being, trying to be creative with, with what your pairings are. I've talked about it in the past, like don't, every pairing that you have, like, don't do the long shot thing. But if you're not doing any of that, like, chances are it you know, again, we don't have like all these crazy crosses to do. Like, you look at like, you take like a Canova and, see, what he's doing with these ball pythons. Like, we don't have that to work with. So, you're really at some point limited by the hobby isn't driven by anymore like it was even, I don't know, was that 6 8 whatever years ago, where it was like, oh, here we have the 7 gene animal, the white and yellow Tremper, Murphy's patternless Eclipse. Like you don't see the interest in that stuff anymore. um and I think a lot of that, I don't know, it may come to this kind of generational thing of more instant gratification, and that kind of stuff takes a shitload of work to output, that kind of stuff. And I don't think the interest is there this year, like, or this at this point. You're not going to see a bunch of people going after projects like that. So I think it's visually trying to separate yourself, so you're not just, if you're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, and we all start somewhere. I started at the bottom when I came in here, into the hobby. That's kind of where most of us start, is coming in at the bottom. Um, if you're not differentiating yourself, at least a couple years in, like animal wise, and trying to, do something different, let alone, providing kind of an exceptional experience and building your reputation and all these things, then it's going to be a lot of just kind of the wheel goes round and round. And I don't know how you at this point try and separate yourself. If it's about the gecko, the animal, let's call it what it is, like your product. Um, if you're not differentiating yourself there, then how exactly do you expect, if you expect, to move the needle on your entire operation? Um, so, and I think that's hard to do right now with what everybody's largely experiencing in this hobby. It's hard to stay motivated, and a lot of that stuff is gonna have to come from from inside. I think there's still certainly merit to trying to align yourself with other breeders that are ethical. You know, be objective. Ask yourself the question, like the circles that you're kind of hanging around in on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. Like, you know, do you do you feel like this is where you're maximizing your time and the information that you're getting? Because, like it or not, you can, yeah, again, you can call me the boomer, the get off my lawn guy all you want. I've seen it. Like, there is a ton of, uh pardon my French, but there's just a ton of shit information out there. Period. End of story. That is factual. It's not up for debate. It's out there. And we have a lot of people coming into the hobby that appear to be jumping on that train. And that should be relatively terrifying for everyone, that's in this hobby. So, um, again, if, my question to the more seasoned breeders that, have been doing this for a long time, like, what are you doing? Like, how can you contribute to improving this situation? Um, and I don't know what the answer to that is, because, to be honest with you, I when I have had conversations with my most trusted peers and friends, um, in this, and we have these hypothetical discussions around, if they were to get out of the hobby and stop doing it, and the impact of that and their collection, and don't you feel some obligation to the hobby and the history and all of these things that were to come along if somebody like this were to leave? And the very quick response was, no, don't feel any obligation at all. um, which was shocking to me. And I've heard that from multiple people like that, which made me kind of look at myself. And again, like you kind of ask, like, am I the messed up one? Like, why
Yeah,
do
am I
I
the crazy one?
why do I care? Like, should I
Yeah.
not care too? Am I putting too much emphasis on the fact of, you think about the implications of some of these larger collections. Like if they were to say there was two, again, like just to keep it simple, like we'll keep it binary, like, big breeder, gets out, and, whether that's a Don or a John or what, any of these like larger collections, a lot of genes, a lot of history. Like if they were to take those and just go, like screw it, like I'm just going to part this out all over the place. Here, this this gecko's going to Utah. These 10 are going to, like, it just disperses all over the hobby, and with all likeliness to never be seen again, because wherever it's going to go, the reality is the majority of people that take that stuff on are never really going to do anything with it. They're going to be lucky if they can sustain any of it. That's just the way it goes. Like, that's no indictment of anybody. Like, again, like this is just, 14 years of seeing this kind of stuff. It just fades into the ether. Or, people like that could, go to somebody like me and say, that's it. I woke up this morning, I'm out. Like, I'm going to sell the business. Like, here, this is what I want for the collection. And then, obviously in that situation, my situation would change drastically overnight. But like, I don't get that same, um, passion, concern, interest in those things, and trying to ensure that that stuff doesn't fade off into the past, as my view on that stuff is clearly uh significantly different than other people's view on it, which is a little disheartening, um for me, to, again, like, nothing to that this is everything that I say is ego aside, like not putting myself on a pedestal. When I just think about people like that, and what their position was in the hobby, and I go, gosh, man, like they really don't, you feel like, you can kind of feel like the Lone Ranger, right? Like it's just kind of like, okay, like that, I guess if I'm the last person that cares about stuff like this, like it is what it is. But I don't know. I feel like, ideally, yeah, I hate to see anybody get out of it, because well, it's not great for the hobby. But I think it's going to be interesting to see in the next year, the next 2 years, like if things turn around, from a fiscal perspective. What are we left with? Like, once the dust settles, like who is still here, um, helping to push the hobby forward. How many new people are coming in under the wing of, like the Pied Piper of incorrect and unethical information. We've just got a lot of weird things to consider here. And right now for me, it's just kind of like I said, it's just, plow forward. And I think that's all anybody can do is, I think this time right now is a good time to kind of reel it in, and whatever level, it doesn't have to be to the degree of what I am doing here, but like reassess, like, your scenario, like use the dip right now as a time to get to those other things that you wouldn't normally get to when things are moving at a clip. Because my estimation right now is, you're not getting as many pings about sales, so by proxy you're not shipping out as much as you would. Maybe that's, and this is spitballing, but it's certainly stuff that I've done in the past. Everybody, not everybody is going to be able to sell every single animal, in a retail scenario, right? So, if it's applicable, finding those, like, ethical people that own, like, I have people here locally, just like the person that Don does, like, that is an ethical, reputable, reptile focused pet store that sells higher end things. Like, they're a crested gecko breeder, and, like, you go in there, this is not PetSmart where everything is like half dead, you know, in the tank. Like these are good people, ethical, care about the animals, been doing it a long time. Search those people out, like find them, because the reality is a lot of these people are probably relegated to getting their more wholesale stuff from like a Reptiles by Mac. So when I go to my local people here, like I can put, if I told people like, you know, the prices that I'm wholesaling at, they'd probably be surprised, because the reality is you compare my stuff to what people on average get from Reptiles by Mac or the Gourmet Rodent, night and day. Visually, health wise, they know where it's coming from. This isn't a, you know, a gecko that came out of a tub of 25 babies, like all the things, right? Not the least of which, you know, when they go to a show or when they sell people, of course they're going to go, hey, like wink, wink, like I get my stuff from Chris Suburban Geckos, like, you know, so like go try and talk to these people. Like if you need avenues to move some things, like there's nothing wrong with wholesaling or not selling everything at retail. It's not a passion of mine. Like that's not where I want to spend my time. You know, my goal isn't to have a warehouse with, you know, where I'm producing, you know, 10,000 leopard geckos, you know, a year, but like, you know, be proactive. Like go try and do something that's going to potentially help get yourself out of a jam. Because if you build a relationship with that person, now, you know, you're potentially in more of a situation like I am, where, you know, I have somebody that's going, hey, like I'm heading to Tinley, I'm going to need 60. You know, it's not 60 retail, but it's 60 less that I have to take care of and continue feeding, which to me, that's at least an hour of work a week, at least, not to mention all the cost. And so, like, I think it's just, you know, right now we should all be afforded a little bit of ability to think more broadly about what we're doing and our options and trying to set ourselves up for success, ideally, once things kind of snap back in the next year or so. Um, right. And I think in theory, hopefully things like that would keep us from losing more breeders over time. I mean, I would have to imagine the vast majority of pet stores, even if we say just ethical pet stores or even kind of reptile or exotic based pet stores, I would have to guess the vast majority of those places are getting from the big box wholesalers. So if I can come in and give you an animal that is visually more healthy, visually more striking, this is what I do. Like this is my core competency. Like here's who I am, my reputation, my like. If you have to pay, if they have to pay a little bit more, like why would they not do that? I mean, like I said, my folks here locally, like no question. You know, Don's friend's pet store in Texas, no question. So that is, as long as those people stay in business, like I feel confident, like I always have that out, you know, and to be quite frank, like in certain situations, I mean, that's a safety net. Like I, you know, I never have to really worry about the numbers that I'm moving. Like I know what numbers that on average I move every year retail, and I know every year these 3 or 4 or whatever people, like I know what they're going to come to me asking for, and I know roughly how many times a year they're going to come asking for it. So all of this is relative, right? Like you know, obviously my scale and what I'm producing is higher than a lot of people, but like it's still like even if you're producing like 50 or 100 or what, like just I think that still holds true. So you know, do yourself some favors and you know, put your operation under the microscope a little bit. You know, while we're all at a spot where we probably have a little time to focus on that kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you have to look at it from both perspectives, like both look at it from a micro lens, but also a macro lens of like the big picture of what else is going on. Um, I think when you're too focused, you get that sense of feeling of where you're just like isolated, and I feel like you probably could feel that way sometimes. I feel that way sometimes, and sometimes it just takes a pinging someone else, another one breeder, like, hey, this is what's going on. You're kind of feeling this way, and you're like, dude, I'm feeling the same way too, or getting that phone call and really talking out just the situations of what's going on, because I think that's when you get into this nature of things that's happening in the hobby. Stuff just seems like it's just going on fire when there are things that are, it's not completely stagnant. Like there's not like no one sold a gecko in the last year or something like that. It's not that bad. Um, it's really just finding those connections, meeting those people, knowing those people, and really being able to get those avenues out there, and having things like the podcast to go and get that information from, and making sure that as a community we're doing, like, at the end of the day, it's all about the geckos, right? It's the passion that we have for the geckos. It's even that when you were talking about before, it's like this season you're kind of feeling like the old Chris back, right? Where you're excited about what's happening, what's in the incubator. You're looking at the incubator and getting that. And once that leaves, that's when you start getting that sense. I know for me, it's like once that's gone, or it's like a month or so when you're feeling that way, where you're like dreading going into the room, you're dreading cleaning, you're dreading putting things together. That's when stuff seems to like hit the fan, and you just want to get rid of everything and just leave by the next day. And it's that excitement that keeps going, and talking about other people. Like, you see this, you posted like an insane white and yellow rainwater the other day, and like getting that, and you're like, man, like this is what we're missing, and this is what I want to see more of. And I want to see you produce that kind of stuff. I want to see other guys who've been on the podcast, and other people like that who are producing this amazing stuff and getting that excitement despite all that stuff. And I think that's what we have to cling on to, and that's the stuff that we really have to focus on going forward, even if things necessarily aren't going out. Before we go on, I want to say thank you to our sponsors. Impeccable Gecko is a small to mid-sized family-operated hobbyist breeder operation. They specialize in leopard geckos with high-quality genetics. Their goal is to provide customers with the absolute best animals that they could produce, coupled with honest and transparent business methods. At Impeccable Gecko, integrity and animal welfare are above all else. Impeccable Gecko is a strong supporter of the Strength and Leos podcast, so follow them on social media and check out what they have available. John of Gecko Boa started early, like most of us, catching lizards and snakes in his backyard at any chance he got. Over the years, he has kept and bred more than 80 species of reptiles. In recent years, his focus has turned to specializing within the genus Eublepharus. He has worked hard to pioneer some of the most cutting-edge leopard geckos while maintaining genetic purity and honesty. He also keeps the most diverse collection of pure Eublepharus species in the world. He has coordinated with biologists around the world and has contributed DNA sampling and distribution range info to help sort out the cladistic relationships within the genus. Check out geckoboa.com for more info and available geckos. Suburban Geckos is operated by Chris Charlton. Chris's passion and enjoyment for herpetoculture, and more specifically leopard geckos, drove the desire to take his hobby to the next level. With experience in breeding and raising reptiles well over 20 years, Chris is dedicated to producing quality animals for both the hobbyist and breeder alike. Suburban Geckos treats each animal with the utmost care and respect, and cuts no corners when it comes to health and integrity of their geckos. What started off as just a couple aquariums has grown into quite the collection in just a few years, and they wouldn't have it any other way. The dedication to their animals is unparalleled and evident in the quality and health of their animals that they produce. Exemplary customer service is another area where they excel. They're readily available to answer any questions you may have regarding their animals, husbandry, and etc. For more info and to see their availability, check out suburbangeckos.com. Blizzy-Bold Leos, while new to the scene, is taking strides in following the footsteps of top-tier breeders and keepers in care and ethics while aspiring to bring fresh looks and crosses to explore latent potential. Prior to becoming a breeder, Greg of Blizzy-Bold Leos completed hours of extensive research on lines, ethics, morphs, and how certain traits interact with others in order to begin projects which are coming to fruition already in the second season of breeding. With a major focus on line breeding the correct way and customer service done right, Blizzy-Bold Leos aspires to be a breath of fresh air to the customers and keepers they encounter. Be sure to check out their Instagram, Blizzy-Bold Leos, and stay up to date on project development, availability, or just tips on having healthy animals in your care. Dab Exotics is a hobbyist breeding operation that was started in 2017. They specialize in producing healthy leopard geckos from top quality genetics. Dab Exotics is an awesome supporter of the Strength and Leos podcast, so follow them on social media and check out what they have available for sale. Shane Kelly is a blue-collar, working-class guy that has a reptile breeding business with his wife and kids. They are currently working with high-quality ball python morphs, western hognose snakes, and select leopard geckos with a focus on bold stripes, and they're looking forward to adding Albie Snow and Ghost this year. They have been listening to the podcast since the beginning and are proud to be a Season 4 sponsor. Go check out their social media, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and also check out their morph market to see what they have available. what are you doing in your individual room that it's like putting pen to paper, like what pairings are you doing, what lines that are on the fringe of the hobby that you're bringing back in, that you're getting excited about individually. And then I think by nature, if you're producing amazing stuff that you like by nature other people are going to be excited about that stuff. And that's where I think we as a hobby need to get back to, just going back to individually, like what are you doing in your reptile room right now, and then eventually how is that getting out to other people.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, it's interesting. You bring up that white and yellow rainwater, and this is stuff again that I wasn't, aside from firewaters, like I wasn't working with rainwaters at all prior to taking down stuff on. Like I didn't have like typhoons and stuff. It was just never like a lot of people. I think you've got this like, and it's pretty widely known. I mean, it's kind of like Tremper Bell rainwater, like, as
Right.
far as interest levels go. Like I've been pushing the bells, I feel like, for so long. And, I still feel like, till the end of time, like things will probably be like so Tremper focused. But like you throw a rainwater out like that white and yellow rainwater, and the interesting story behind that stuff, and I think this is one of these things that people need to understand too, is that not everything is going to be a quick hit. Like, so the cornerstone male of that project is a white and yellow Mac Eclipse het rainwater that came from ISMA over in Spain. Really cool male. Like that was Don's cornerstone male that kind of started all the white and yellow rainwater stuff. I had no less than, I don't know, between rainwaters and typhoon females, 8, 10 here, and I have paired him to them every year since that collection has been here. Out of that, and this is coming from a white and yellow, right? So those of us that understand like the genetics and how that works, right? Like here's where the mind funk starts to come in here, because everybody goes, oh well, like you should be producing tons of white and yellow rainwaters then. Like in my experience, like there's something there. I don't know. Again, like it could just be the gecko gods going, no, Chris, like that's not for you. But I don't think that's the case, because over the last 3 years of pairing that male to all of those females, I have produced two white and yellow rainwaters. Two. I have produced more typhoons, straight up rainwaters, Mac typhoons, but two white and yellows, and one that was the quality of that one that I posted the other day. So therein comes again, it's that dedication to, like, that popping out was so huge to me that I was just like, finally, like I couldn't even tell you, is that 50, rainwaters, 75 rainwaters that I've produced, and one like that has popped out. Like, I don't know what the logic is there, but it would seem to me that there might be something kind of weird between rainwater and white and yellow. It certainly doesn't, if you put all that on a Punnett square, like it certainly doesn't line up with what the outcome should be. Um, but it's that kind of stuff. Like not everything is going to be a quick hit. The melanistic stuff, crossing, getting away from, the pure black knight stuff and crossing that stuff into the carbons. That has been a royal pain. But like I had brought in uh, a Black Knight carbon male from Luca this year, that's about as black as any Black Knight I've ever seen, and cross that to the carbon females. And then I've also got the Black Pearl charcoal stuff crossed to the carbon females, and the F1s that I had produced of the Black Pearl charcoal cross stuff they were nothing to look at, where I was just like, oh, this is not netting out how I thought. The F2s that popped out this year, completely different story. Like dark, look awesome. And then the ones that the carbons that cross straight to Black Knight, like I produced a baby that so far looked like it's solid black with a white stripe down the middle of its back. And I'm like, okay. But like now we're getting somewhere. But the reality is, like, a lot of the stuff is just not gonna it's not gonna happen overnight. Like, when I saw that first generation of the black pearl charcoal stuff, like everything in me was just like, ditch it. No point. Like, it's not going to net you the results, or it's going to take way too long. Um, and I talked to people that I know that were working on the same thing in South Korea, and they were sending me pictures like, hey, like, here's F2. And I was like, okay, like, I'll give it, another year and see what the results are. And sure enough, like, they were right. So, um, point being, there's a lot of this stuff you just you gotta see it through. Not everything's going to be a year or even a 2 year, sometimes a 3 year, um, kind of turnaround. Like, some of the stuff is just, there are projects I'm looking at where I'm like, man, like, I'm probably going to be like, potentially like 53, 55 before I see the fruits of this. And I think part of that is just kind of putting yourself in the mindset of being committed to this. It goes back to that thing that we used to talk about years ago, and that this is like, it's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. And I still look at it that way. Like, I'm like, oh, cool. Like, here I am at almost 48 years old. Like, what stuff, what are these projects going to look like 10 years from now at 58? So I think, part of it is just getting more people into that mindset, in generally speaking, in a generation that is not kind of geared towards things that aren't more immediate, um, and realizing that a lot of this stuff is not overnight. um, you know so
Yeah.
let me ask you, not to put you on the spot, but some of these things that we've talked about, coming from your perspective, talking to a lot of other breeders, still being more active out there than what I am as far as staying plugged in socially, um, and generally just having a different spin on it. Like, what do how are you viewing things right now as far
I
as the
think
hobby goes?
extremely similar to you. Um, I think it's been a journey, and the longer um, you start to see things, it's like, okay, there's no other way but for this to work out. Like, there's no really other option in terms of failure. There's going to be times where you're going to be getting, it's going to be tough, right? It's like all things that you have to sacrifice and work for. And it's nothing, no, in terms of that, it's just like, okay, what is this obstacle going to be this time? Is it going to be like, it's going to be a move? Is it going to be um, a project where like a female and a male die that you're looking forward to? Is it going to be something in life that you have totally no control over, just your circumstances? It's like kind of going back to what you were saying before. It's like taking the things that you have control over, and are you just going to complain about it, or are you just going to put your head down to the work? Or are you just going to grind until whatever that thing is that you're working towards is going to work out? And it really sucks. I think for me, being in kind of like the educational, putting content space out in terms of leopard geckos, and also being on getting into it in the tail end of that era where things were in the golden age, if you will, of what was happening, the people who are in it, and you aspiring to be that. But once those people are out, it's like, okay, what are you doing now? Like, who are you aspiring to be in these spaces, and what exciting stuff? Even like YouTube, like you see no real leopard gecko YouTube content that's being put out at a high quality, something that's trustworthy, that has those ethics that you align to, that you aspire to have in the hobby. And when you see people who are getting a platform based off of just crap that is not what you stand for, and stuff that is leading other people to other directions, and it seems to be so much louder, and those voices just seem to be so much louder than just a little guy who's you know staying with the right albino strains and not breeding lemon frost. And the fact that enigma is still a debate like these days, and that just seems to be so much louder. It's like, should I just give in? Like, should I just start producing just stuff like this? Should I just do whatever and mixing eye traits? Like, no one's gonna know if I start adding marblade to my clip stuff, like just stupid stuff like that. And you get those thoughts, and you start to ruminate on it. But um, I think for me, it's just clinging on to the fact that I might just be paving the way and putting in the work for something that I might not see that investment be returned on in 5 or 10 years from now. And it's like asking the question, like, am I willing to grind now, to put in the dirty work now for that investment that I might not see 10 years from now? And it's looking at other places and other just realms of the world, the finance world, where you're seeing people like Warren Buffett, who's like, not that I'm saying like Leopard Gecko is going to be anything like that, but
Mm-hmm.
like just investing, 50 years ago and like what that those dividends have paid into now. Um, Seeing people like you who like going back to your old posts and Facebook and just the geek, the gecko nerd in me, like, okay, where did Chris start off at? And I'm like, okay, if he started off here, he is where he is now based on those steps. Like, it would only be logical to follow those steps as best as I can and continue to have that. But it does get scary when you're seeing these things that haven't popped up before, especially if it's like you're shaken. You see this stuff in like politics, the country, not to get political or anything like
Yeah.
that, but you're seeing these things that haven't happened before and are unprecedented. And it's like, what do I do? Like, am I going to stay to my core convictions and my core values, or am I going to settle for less and give in to this like apocalyptic, like post gecko era of like what we were at? And I think that's the scary thing, where it's like, is it even worth it? Like, continue to go the route that we're going? And that's the question I think everyone has to ask themselves at this point. Like, is it worth it, or should I just give up now? Is this the time to kind of fall off before it gets any worse than that?
Do you hear a lot of those sentiments from other breeders?
Yeah, I think I do. I think there's a point, um, like pandemic. It was just like literally the roads were paved in gold. It's like you can't get any better than this. And now that things are tough, it's like I'm either gonna buckle down or I'm gonna get rid of everything, change the way I'm breeding, um, and yeah, I think people are just in that space and they're like, what do I do? And I think they're looking at other people to see what they're doing, and people are either gonna follow suit or they're just gonna stick to the road that they're at right now. So
Yep, agreed. Yeah,
yeah,
I think like
it's a lot of observation right now, I think, for a lot of
mhm.
people.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of my thoughts or suggestions that I've given here. Like I don't, I can't say that it's things that are right are going to work for anybody. But again, going back to kind of some of the ideas that I have, I would say, if if there are, I guess, questions that people have around any of this stuff, and kind of what I was talking to about the aspirational bit of this, if that's something that that you aspire to growing and sticking with this, and you know I guess reach out to me, let me know, like give me some feedback as to of hearing things like that, if that's something that speaks to you. um because I do hear, it's very pocketed conversations that I have where people are like, say the word, and and I'm on board. I do know and have communications with people that um would fall into that category, right? Would be on that list. But a lot of times, um I don't know, not everybody's comfortable with it. I feel like sometimes people may not feel comfortable to reach out or talk to me or anybody about these kind of things. So shoot me a message on the website. Hit me up on Facebook. Whether it's through the personal page or the business page, and let me know. Like if any of this feedback for me is important, I think too, about driving this kind of thing forward. Like if any of this stuff I'm saying like resonates, then you know don't don't hesitate to reach out and tell me that. Let me know. Like let's talk about it. So
Yeah, I think that's super important. Like having conversations, having platforms like this, the podcast, obviously, but even just, I feel like there's also less and less spaces now that I'm thinking about it. Kind of just occurred to me, but like back in the day, people had the forums and obviously there was like those fringe people that were um, kind of causing problems or whatever, but it was a really good place for people to have honest conversations. And that's just less and less of a case these days for people to just be like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Is anybody else seeing this other in like the private inboxes, the phone calls, the text messages, and things like that? It's not in a place where it's a more of a public forum and people are really seeing that stuff. I don't know if you agree.
I think Facebook in general is the forums were always more of a wealth of knowledge around that kind of stuff than Facebook was. And then we had Facebook for a long time. And now I feel like generationally speaking, like all the jokes are about, oh, you're still on Facebook. And it's like, okay, I get it. Like Instagram, it's about pretty pictures, but what, like you don't have like forums or, groups on there, like any way to really exchange valuable information. Sure. If I want to like DM, back and forth, 100 times, which I don't. I just feel like we're again like moving more. At what point? At what point is Instagram gonna be like, oh, like you're still on Instagram, and like everything is this like ridiculous
Gotta get on
instant
TikTok.
gratification cancer
two
of like
second
TikTok
videos.
that
Yeah.
like that again, you can boomer me all day long, but like I just the progression of where I see this thing going, it just like it's more and more just immediate, like instant gratification. Like I want my 30-second, stupid brainless video, and then like I'm on to the next one, and I'm like that. I'm sorry, like that does not align with what we're trying to do here. It does not align with how things were built in order to get us to where we are today. Go back and look at geckoforums.net. A lot of those posts are probably unfortunately gone, but you see pages and pages and pages of discussion between
Right.
the Marshas, the Gale Woods, the like, this had nothing to do with let me do my stupid, goofy ass, like quick Instagram story thing that's like corny and cringy. And then I'm going to show a leopard. Like nothing about any of that crap had to do with building the foundation of what everybody is like riding on today. So there again, like we keep going down this road and that becomes the focus. Like I can see where this all nets out. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think
Do you think
I
there's a
think
line with that? Like in terms of like the whole realm of like, like someone could make the argument that you're an influencer, I'm an influencer. What we're doing and just the reach that we have and the kind of information and content we're putting out there. But when it comes to like the commodification of like the gecko smiling or like the I don't know the kind of the play on type of things, um like where is that line that you like find yourself in terms of like reaching people but also like getting to the business of like this is what I'm here, like am I a social media influencer who breeds geckos or am I a gecko breeder who's using social media to push
bingo,
the values that I have, kind of thing.
bingo.
And that's
Yeah,
where people gotta draw that line
yeah.
and figure that
I
out for
I think
themselves.
there's always going to be some level of subjectivity to just about everything. But
Yeah.
if you're not that fine line, if you're seeing that in a way that this all becomes about if this all becomes about reach just to get the next sale, or maybe it's not even to get the next sale. Maybe generationally speaking, this is the reality is this. Like I'm not going to say like social media isn't valuable in any way, but the reality is that a lot of this is about attention and validation and all these things that um at the end of the day, like is that gecko smiling video that went viral, like has that helped you get a few more sales here and there? Probably. I'm going to venture to guess that those sales are more in the pet part of this, which you know that's great. Like sure, you got somebody into leopard geckos, which that's good, but like again, like I don't know, if you pair that back again, like how much of the percentage of those people are ever really going to do anything that's going to help like move the hobby forward, right? Like, sure, we want people interested in leopard geckos and, like, of course, like the sustainability of the species and all those things, but like the hobby itself, like this is really all been driven by, most of us over the years. I don't care if it was, Jeff Galewood 10 years ago or me now. Like, it's not driven by people wanting to put a leopard gecko in their 10-gallon aquarium at home as the family pet. Like, that's the reality. Like, that didn't drive this any more than, how many people do you think that are buying Canova's, $15,000 ball python? You know what I mean? Like, not many.
Right.
This is about breeders, and breeders working with other people and breeders getting things from other breeders, and
Yeah, it
like
goes back to sustainability. Like,
it,
how
it,
sustainable are we doing these things, the
it's just,
practices?
it's this cyclical thing.
Yeah.
And I don't, that's part of the piece that I feel like has kind of fallen off a bit. um so I don't know, I think social media, all this stuff certainly has its value. I think I'm not even going to get on my soapbox about TikTok. I am not a consumer of that. Never have been, never will be, for multiple reasons. But again, like, like you put it, like, are you an aspiring influencer that happens to breed leopard geckos, or are you, a leopard gecko breeder and rooted in that hobby that's, using some social media on the side, to help
Yeah.
promote yourself. And I think largely those things get confused, and we don't have anybody enough in the latter portion of that latter group that are really focusing on the fact that, yeah, no question, like, I'm a leopard gecko breeder, like, I use these tools, for reach, but this isn't about me. Like, I don't know. I mean, again, but it's different. I'm much more of an introverted person, by nature. I'm not somebody that seeks validation, from anybody. Sure, I like to show a nice animal out there, and it's good, for my business. But at the end of the day, like, if it was just me back there and some of these geckos that I've produced, and like I run it upstairs to my wife and I'm like, you're not going to believe this. Like, it's still the same thing to me. Like, I
Right.
don't, I don't need anybody to tell me like how nice that animal is. And some of these videos and stuff you see, it's just like, man, like, it just feels like the focus is much more on how am I going to be that, that personality, um, doing goofy videos versus, like, that's where, to me, it gets into this whole thing of like, yeah, like, how many people really care? Like, and if the answer is none, then why do I?
Right.
um so,
It's a scary
I
thing
don't.
to think about. Like,
Yeah.
what that's leading into. Like, is that what things are just ending up to? And are we just going to be like the black sheep of the group kind of thing? Or that's just something we have to give into in order to just like stay afloat of what we're doing? And even at that point, like, is it even worth doing? Like,
Yeah.
is there a way to kind of like go back to how, not to just be on this like, oh, things back in the day and this is how things were, but I don't know, to be rooted in like what most people got in it for at the end of the day, kind of thing.
Yeah. In summation to all of this, like, as always, like, subjectively, like, I think we have work to do as a hobby. There's work to be done. And, if if you're the type of person that, like, it's more this myopic mindset of like, I'm just gonna breed leopard geckos and sell them, and I don't really give a shit, about the hobby and what happens 5 years from now, and if the economy stays this way, and I, have some trouble selling, then I'm just gonna sell everything off on Craigslist and call it a day. Like, I think if you're anybody that aspires to help keep this whole thing afloat and move it forward, like, my ask is the same to everybody as it would be to myself. It's like, what are you what are you doing? Like, what's your contribution? Like, do you think about this stuff? Do you care about it at all? Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't think, hopefully, I think, talking today, you know, I don't think it had this doomsday connotation that I feel like it would have, if we would have talked a year ago. But by the same token, like I'm not here to sell anybody anything, um, whether that's a gecko or whether that's sell anybody on my opinion and outlook on things. But um, to me, what I look for, like, you know, what I kind of expect from the hobby and hope for the hobby, like I think we got work to do. Like we've got to find, other people that have similar viewpoints and, try and lift this thing up, rather than just looking at everything, what we're doing right now, and just kind of accepting the status quo. So,
Yeah, no, it's a definitely kind of a like look into the mirror kind of thing and see the reality of it. Like no filters, like no fanciness, kind of like looking at it straight and um, making a conscious decision for people. And it's something that I guess has been harder in the past. I guess that's a good thing about what's happening, or a positive thing that you could take out of it. Like kind of regardless of where you were at in the hobby, like you're always selling, regardless if it was like the stuff that you're producing was mid grade or high quality stuff. Obviously, was is always selling and always is going to sell. But it kind of gives you like a big wake up call. Like, what am I in this for? Is it for you know the show of like being a leopard gecko breeder, which like I think in reality, like there's so many better investments to get in if you want to start a business. Um, but it's like asking those questions of value and what values are driving, the purpose of what you're in it for, which I guess is one positive thing we could take out of it. And maybe it'll get some people to kind of step up. Like, hey, we see these things going on, and this is going to be a time for me to step up and help contribute to the goal and the vision that it seems like the few are having, but get that to be more of a mass appeal kind of thing.
yeah, agreed.
Well, Chris, dang, good conversation as always. People, I think, are gonna love this conversation. And I guess to leave off with people to something, I guess to look forward to um, in the future, and to really have tangible, I guess, just things to hold on to in the hobby and that passion. Like what is keeping you in that place where you're continuing to stay just excited and staying almost like a kid at heart with all these things going on?
I have, for friends of mine that have gotten out of it, I've circled back with them and asked them, hey, now that you've been out 6 months or a year, 2 years, like, has your feelings changed about it at all? Do you miss it? And for the most part, the answer to that is absolutely no. So when they got out, they knew that they were out, they were
Yeah,
done,
they're
and
past the point
that
of
never
burnout.
changed, right? So,
Yeah.
um, with me, the you know the hatchlings that are, the juveniles hatching out in the incubators there can tell the story of being interrupted at all hours with my big head staring into the window, um, which tells me like I still have the same level of excitement, if not more, than I did the first year that I produced a handful of leopard geckos. Like there are so many things, and a lot of that I think is the crosses, a lot of the weird stuff that I've to, like, as an example, like I took a really nice atomic electric female, and I had a white and yellow bold stripe, that came from Don's collection that ultimately came from Dylan. Dylan had produced it back in the day. And I believe that animal was actually het free too, but nonetheless. So I took a white and yellow bold stripe to an atomic electric that has no stripe. And I was like, let's see what happens. And the first clutch popped out, and I was like, oh, like that's awesome. So it's that kind of thing that, knowing that, like, I was way more intentional this year, in what I was doing, the taking the thought of that and that excitement about did it pay off? Like that, I'm constantly going in there. I'll even at late at night, like before I go upstairs and go to bed, like I'll go in there and turn the light on, and all these babies are like, dude, what are you doing? But I'm
Yeah.
like, did anything else pop out? So when I have a tangible like dip in that level of excitement, heaven forbid if I ever get to a point where I just don't care. I know, like that's been such a like a benchmark for me. Like I know that that's something to watch out for, because every year, like if there's a graph, like every year it's the same for me, like flat line, but in a positive way. Like I never
Yeah.
like take these dips to where I'm like, like time to go check the babies. Like it's always excitement and going in and like taking care of cleaning the babies when I go in there, and once they get to that kind of, for me, like the magic number of like that 20 to 25, 30 gram range, like when they're at their peak, um and see really what they're netting out to be, like that's all just still like 14 years in, super super exciting to me. So I think it's finding those things that that you're passionate about with this, and especially in times like this, like just holding on to it, right? Like again, like I
Hmm.
said, I see these babies popping out, and I'm just like, there's no way that I would quit this right now.
Right.
No way. Like to me, I tell myself like I'm just getting started. Like if I'm fortunate enough to stay vertical for another 20, 25 years or something, like there's still there's still plenty of work. I mean, that's more time than I've currently spent in the hobby. So,
Yeah.
um, I look at it from the standpoint of like Iran. Like I'm not you're unless something just terrible happens, or things do some abrupt change, like the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Like I don't see anywhere on my map that I'm stopping, doing what I'm doing. Um, so I think there's that for me, like I do see a lot of exciting things coming. For me, there is going to be, I was talking about like those white and yellow Mac firebolts, like that. The male that's producing those is a male that, if I could post that male today on social media, and I probably produced that male 4+ years ago. I could post that on social media today and it would go through the roof, because it is legitimately one of the coolest, most unique. I've never seen anything else like it ever. But I've never been able to get him to produce. But now, for whatever reason, like this year, he's producing, and those genes are like, some of the babies that he's popped out are like, I'm
Yeah.
like, man, like that. And that's, to be clear, like, is that a good thing for me and the business? And if I put those out there, like, are they going to be expensive because they're super unique and you're not going to get them anywhere else? And like, yes, but like that to me is exciting for the hobby, because if I get that stuff out there into the hands of competent people that are going to do the right thing with it, like, or actually do something with it, then that does help move the
Hmm.
needle. It does help things forward. In theory, like it also helps me to get people out of the mindset of, in this case, firebolt, that like everything's got to be a firebolt. And not only does it have to be a firebolt, but it has to have a perfect stripe from the back of its neck to the tip of its tail. And like this, again, like this myopic, like branch away from that stuff, man. Like the best thing that you can do is try and get creative, man. Like, all those, so much of those things that I post on social media are, I mean, some of them are like from like very planned out, like, this is what I thought would come out. But like some of these things are like, they're the knockout outliers, because like I'm just taking weird off the wall, nice stuff to weird off the wall, nice stuff. And like sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Um, so I think you gotta do things to like keep yourself interested and motivated. Like hopefully, whether it's like having these conversations or some of the animals that I put out there and show people, or animals that people are getting from me, like hopefully that's an aspirational thing for to some level, right? Like having people being able to like aspire to something in this hobby the way that I was able to aspire to things in the past. But I think some of that too has to come from within. Like if you're not getting enough excitement from what you're seeing, either A, look somewhere else, or B, like you might have to like build some excitement for yourself, right? If you're not seeing the things that are making your socks roll up and down, then maybe you should try and create them. So
We'll leave it there, man. It's a mic drop. Great way to end things off. Chris, appreciate all the work that you've done, all the work that you keep on going. If everything else hits the fan, like we know you're going to be here holding down the fort when you take over the podcast too. Throwing that out there.
Never. No, I appreciate it, man. It was good to, I mean, I know we talk often, but it was good to get back on here. And like I said, I definitely had some anxiety about it because I didn't want to come back and be like, everything sucks. So I think we're in a better spot now.
Yeah, there's things to look forward to.
Yep, and it was great getting back on here and kind of getting back on the horse, so to speak. So
sweet. We'll have you on soon. Some more updates. Hopefully, see some of those things kind of planning out on social media, and we'll talk to you soon.
Maybe we'll get a round table going this summer. With see if we can.
Yeah.
Get John out of the pull him out of the shed or something.
Right. So. Exactly. Out of wherever he is in Idaho.
Right.
Middle of nowhere.
Well, cool, man. Sounds good, dude. I appreciate it, man. Take care.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.